Hey, good morning, everyone. It's currently 9 o'clock. Let's give it a few minutes before we get started. That way others can join. And so we'll just take a couple of minutes and we'll get started here shortly. Thank you. Hey, good morning and welcome. And thank you for joining us for the State Water Resources Control Board's Drinking Water and Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program fee stakeholder meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom and webcast platforms and is also being recorded. My name is David Ceccarelli, and I'm the Fee and Revenue Branch Manager within the Division of Administrative Services. Assisting me today with this presentation is Cassandra White, who is the Staff Service Manager 2 in the Fee and Revenue Branch. Also joining us is staff from the Division of Drinking Water, and also ELAP staff is also joining us. Today we have many of the Fee and Revenue Branch staff working behind the scenes to ensure that this meeting runs as smoothly as possible. If any time throughout this event you find that you are having technical difficulties, please email das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. That email is currently on the screen, and it's also on the agenda. Individuals attending via Zoom, please use the raise the hand function if you'd like to ask a question or provide a comment. If you're joining us through the webcast, you can also submit a comment or ask a question by emailing the email, again, on the screen or the one that's on your agenda. In the past, there have been some delays in the broadcast through the webcast. Therefore, through the meeting, staff may take an opportunity and pause so the broadcast can catch up to the listeners. Again, we thank you for joining us virtually today. We thank you for your patience as we've moved into this 100% virtual meeting space. We're doing our best to ensure everyone can participate in an effective way. So let's just go over a few meeting guidelines. 1, remember to use the handouts that were sent to you via email. If you do not have the handouts, don't worry. We'll be sharing the documents on the screen. You can request a copy of the documents after the meeting, or the handouts are posted on the Water Board's the Water Board's fee webpage. Again, remember, if you're having any technical difficulties, please don't hesitate to email us. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. And then again, remember, you can submit comments and questions throughout the event through the email, again, listed on the screen. For the meeting to run efficiently and stay on track, we're requesting each participant who wants to ask a question to please ask one question at a time. I understand you may have a clarifying question to your original question, and that's acceptable. Once your question is fully answered, we're going to move on to the next participant's question, and you will be put back into the order of participants who are requesting to ask a question. In addition, if the discussion starts to move away from the intent of the meeting, which is to discuss drinking water and ELAP fees, then I am going to ask the participant and I meet offline to coordinate these discussions further and involve appropriate staff as needed. So at this moment, let's take go through and review the agenda. So we will be starting with the drinking water program, and we will item number 2 is to discuss the Safe Drinking Water Account Fund condition, which is attachment 1 on your handout. Item number 3, which is attachment 2, is the Safe Drinking Water Account budget cost drivers. And we'll be briefly discussing some of the budget change proposals that are driving the cost. And then we're going to then pivot into item number 4, which then moves us into the ELAP program. So attachment 3 is the ELAP budget fund condition. Item 5 is the ELAP budget cost drivers, which is attachment 4. And then we'll have a discussion on, which is item 6, which is the ELAP fee structure option. And then we'll move into open discussion and then next steps. So let's jump into item number 2. So what's on the screen is the fund condition for the Safe Drinking Water Account. And the Safe Drinking Water Account supports the State Water Board's drinking water program. At our last stakeholder meeting back in March, was one of the first times I was able to show this in several years. One, of course, the not having the reports and the numbers from our fiscal system, which our accounting office has done a great job on getting this back online and being able to get us the reports and the numbers. And so basically just a few areas that I've just kind of wanted to highlight, which is fiscal year 22-23, which is the current year projections. Of course, we're still working on closing our books for 22-23. So here's where we are projecting our numbers to land. And so we're anticipated to collect revenue about 40.8 million. And our expenditures are projected to be 39.5 million, which basically means that our revenues are exceeding our expenditures by about 1.2 million, leaving the fund about a $2.3 million fund reserve with a fund reserve balance about 5.9%. And so with that said, and we'll be talking about the budget cost drivers here in a moment, but if we don't do anything in fiscal year 23-24, and let me just kind of walk through here what we're anticipating. Again, our revenues would anticipate to remain the same just based on the number of fee payers on our current fee schedule. So generating total revenue of 40.8 million. And our expenditures, though, are going up to 42.9 million. That would put us into a structural deficit, again, comparing our revenues with our expenditures, meaning our expenditures would be exceeding our revenues by about $2 million, which would drive the reserve down to basically 0.7%, so less than 1%. So looking at the budget year, which is fiscal year 23-24, we're looking at approximately about a 5.5% fee increase, and a 5.5% increase spread out to all the drinking water fee payers would basically generate total revenue of 43.1 million, and our total expenditures of 42.9 million, which again really aligns the program, meaning our expenditures and our revenues are in line, and then continues to help us maintain a 5.9% reserve. So before I move on, does anyone have any questions regarding the fund condition for the Safe Drinking Water account? So I don't see any right now. We could always go back to it. Let's move to slide 3, which again is now going to show us how we got to the our governor's May revised fee setting budget of the $42.9 million. And I'm going to pass this on to Cassandra, and Cassandra's going to walk through the numbers here.
Morning, everyone. So as we look at the first table, the first number we see is the fee setting budget from last fiscal year at about $39.6 million. And for the May revised governor budget, we're looking at $42.9 million, a net difference of about $3.3 million or 8.4%. And below, as we go to the second table, we see some of the detail that's driving that cost. The first is the state operations, and that number has not changed from the March stakeholder meeting. And it was an increase of about $3.404 million and 7.7%. And that's primarily employee compensation, salaries, healthcare, and retirement. The next category is BCPs. And the first BCP was introduced at the March stakeholder meeting. It has not changed. And it's just, again, informational that the spending authority for the microplastic BCP from 19-20 fiscal year has terminated. And then there is a credit to the fund of about $175,000 and about 0.4%. But there were 2 new BCPs as of the May revise. And the first is the lead and copper rule revision, regulation, implementation, and database. And it's also a spending authority reduction of $486,000, about 1.2%. And this BCP is the implementation of the fiscal year 22-23 lead and copper rule revision and regulatory development BCP. And the implementation calls for a reduction of the original Safe Drinking Water account appropriation from $942,000 to $456,000. And the reduction of $486,000 will now be allocated to the federal trust fund. And the second BCP is the Division of Administrative Services BCP, which provide $2.3 million in continuous funding from various special funds for 15 permanent positions. And the safe drinking water portion is $214,000 at about 5%. And the purpose of this BCP, it will provide resources that will be used to address increased administrative workload due to rapid and evolving program growth, increased resource management and tracking workload, and reporting requirements of the Division of Administrative Services. And as always, for more BCP information, you can refer to the Department of Finance, and a direct link for each of the new BCPs has been provided in the handout today. And then our last stakeholder is pro rata. And again, there was no change from the March stakeholder meeting. And it was an increase of $730,000, about 1.8%. And that wraps up our cost drivers. Again, overall, it was a net difference of about 3.3 and 8.4%. Are there any questions at this time?
So thank you, Cassandra. Yeah, so just to recap, so our cost from the last time we set our fees back in September, which was our fee setting budget from 22-23 to, of course, the May revise, have gone up $3.3 million, which is basically an 8.4% change in our cost. Now, to generate that revenue of $3.3 million, we're anticipating needing roughly about a 5.5% fee increase to generate the revenue and to maintain our current fund reserve. So I'm not seeing any questions. Let me ask, are there any email questions that are coming in? Okay, not seeing any questions. So we can always come back to this, but this is, of course, the portion of the meeting that had to do with the drinking water program and the status of the Safe Drinking Water account. So let's move to the next agenda item. And this is attachment 3. Cassandra, how about you go over the cost drivers first? Let's do the next slide. Let's start with that, and then I will move into the fund condition after that. And so we're now moving into the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund budget cost drivers. And the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund is the fund that helps support the ELAP, Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program. So Cassandra, I'll go ahead and let you start with the attachment 4 slide here.
Okay. Okay, so the first table is last year's fee setting budget. It was at 4.7 million, followed by the governor's May revise fee setting budget for fiscal year 23-24, and it's at 4.65 million. A net difference went down a little bit, about $85,000 or 1.8%. And there was no change from the March stakeholder meeting. So the second table shows the cost drivers. The first one, the state operation, there was a minimal increase of $11,000 and 0.2%. And it's, again, primarily employee compensation, salaries, healthcare, and retirement. And the second cost driver was pro rata. And there was a decrease there of $96,000 at 2%. And that is the cost drivers for the ELAP fund.
Yeah, thank you, Cassandra. Yeah, one thing I wanted to just point out, there was, as you can see, there's a decrease in pro rata. And there was also a decrease in pro rata last year. 2 years ago, I believe it was in fiscal year 21-22, Department of Finance had adjusted pro rata higher in this program than it should have. And so Department of Finance moving forward is making the adjustments to correct that. So again, from last year and this year, there are decreases in the pro rata amounts, which are kind of self-adjusting the fund itself. So as a result, there's a slight decrease overall in the fund itself by about $85,000. So again, our fee setting budget was, when we set fees last year, 4.7, and then this year's may revise is $4.6 million. So let's move to back to the attachment 3, which is the fund condition.
David, before you start, we did have a question
Oh, okay.
on the cost driver.
Yes, you want to respond to it?
Yes, so the question is, what percent of the 7.7 increase represents employee salary increase? And we don't have the specific breakdown, just overall, it's kind of all rolled. Employee compensation is included, and which includes salary, which includes retirement and healthcare, but we don't break it out by the specifics of each category.
Correct. And also kind of keep in mind that the division of drinking water, or the safe drinking water account, supports many different classifications through, you know, the technical side of the engineers to administrative staff, and they're all under different union classifications, and they get different contracts. So those amounts could vary per, you know, classification. So when we get the budgeted numbers from the Department of Finance, it's all basically rolled up with the employee compensation, and then of course the retirement, and then the share of the healthcare costs that hit the fund. Hopefully that answers the question. So if there are no more questions on the safe drinking water account, we'll move back to ELAP here. So here's the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund, looking at current year 22-23. And this is what we're showing here is what our regulatory fees are, so our revenue. So we're projected to collect about $4 million in total revenue. This is $3.7 million in regulatory fees, so the fees we collect. And then the other revenue also has to do with some fines and penalty revenue that comes into the fund, also of $267,000. And I know program staff had worked on collecting some fines and penalties, continues to do that, and some revenue did come in 22-23, so we're accounting for it there. So we're looking at total revenue of $4 million. Now, what we're showing here on our expenditures are what we're projecting our expenditures to be. Now, as we mentioned in the cost drivers earlier, our budgetary expenditures for the program, you know, are in the ballpark of $4.6 million. But as you may remember, during the fee setting process with the board, and in our last stakeholder meetings, during last year's fee setting, and even in the year prior, is that program we're taking steps to provide some savings in the fund and for our expenditures. And so a couple of ways is, one, they were holding a couple of positions vacant, and then also charging several positions to another funding source. So by doing that, those expenditures aren't hitting this fund, they're hitting other funds basically. And so by doing that, that lowers our water board operation expenditures to about 3.3 million. And then when you add in the other state operations, our total expenditures are basically $3.7 million. Again, what's happening is that up to 5 positions are again either being held vacant, or positions are being charged to other funding sources, which is providing some savings in the total expenditures. So we are projecting that in the current year that there will be a positive ending balance and a fund reserve of about $9.8 million. So moving forward, though, in fiscal year 23-24, if we don't do anything, we are anticipating that our fee revenue is going down, and we'll have some discussions about this here in a moment. Basically, one of the reasons is the drop off of labs in the program, which then, of course, reduces our fee revenue, and so we're anticipating that our fees are going to be around $3 million, and the total expenditures, and this goes back to the budget cost drivers, is that our total budget cost expenditures for the program, which supports 25 positions for ELAP, comes out to $4.6 million. So there's definitely a deficit of basically $1.6 million compared to our actual budgetary expenditures and the projected revenue that we would be getting in under the current fee structure. What this basically means is, we started with a small beginning balance of 367,000, which would give us an ending balance of 1.2 million, and then a fund reserve of being in the negative. And so what this translates to is basically we need 56. The fund has a shortfall of 56% revenue, and so when you look at the last column there, what's needed is basically $4.6 million, which is basically 56% more in revenue than what we're anticipating. And so with that said, then total revenue and total expenditures then start to line up, and leaves us, of course, with a slight ending balance of 393,000 and an 8% reserve. So what this is showing is that that there is a shortfall in regulatory fees by roughly 56%, and based on our expenditures of, again, fully funding all 25 positions at 4.6 million. So before we move into, of course, the next item, does anyone have any questions, of course, on the fund condition? And then, our next item is going to start discussing options for our ELAP fee structure. I'm not seeing any yet. I'm going to the next item, which is a discussion on ELAP fee structure option. I'm going to pass this on to Christina Sotelo, and I know her and staff are online, so I'm going to let them tee this off.
Morning.
Hey, good morning, Caitlin.
Christine, do we have you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good morning.
Hi. So where we're at right now is we're working with a different option for a fee structure. We presented an update to the board on May 2nd about our program and let them know about updates on program operations and including what you heard today from David and his group. And the board has directed us to work with stakeholders to develop a new fee structure. And so we're working with DAS and their team to put together a work group to come up with other alternative ways of funding ELAP with a new fee structure. So what we'd like to do is invite the laboratory community to participate in this work group so we can present a potential new fee structure to the board, I believe sometime in September. So Kate, did you want to add anything else?
No, I think that was a good summary. Just that we're, in the process of constructing this work group and having one-on-one meetings with laboratories and interested stakeholders, and that we're going to be moving pretty quickly with this, aiming to get together before the end of the month. So like Christine said, we can present some options to the board come this fall. One of those being, of course, just a fee increase that Dave was talking about, but also to have options around the new direction and structure that they want us to explore. And if anyone listening is interested in participating, you're more than welcome to email me directly or our general email box at ELAP, and our staff will make sure that that gets to us.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, David?
No, I definitely think you covered it. I just kind of want to recap some of the next steps. I know you guys have kind of been internally working on different options, and then also reaching out to some of the labs, having some discussions. But part of the next steps are forming this group, and I think the timeline that you're trying to get this work group is by the end of the month. So in the next few weeks, to start having these discussions. And so they'll, and as Caitlin said, if anyone does want to participate, to of course reach out to ELAP and make sure they get their name and so they can participate in the meetings, and then also look forward to the invites. Yeah, no, I just want to kind of course, recap those next steps. When it comes to the stakeholder meeting process regarding, the budgets and of course, our further discussions as we're having here, our next fee stakeholder meeting will be August 4th. And we are trying to drive to taking a proposal to the board on not just drinking water, but ELAP fees, an agenda item to the board on it's either September 19th or September 20th, kind of around that timeline. So we recognize that time is short on this, but we're definitely kind of moving along, and we're definitely internally working closely with ELAP, and also again as Christine and Caitlin said, looking at forming a larger group and having this further discussions here by the end of the month. So are there any other questions on ELAP? I think there, I believe there's a question that came in from Inland Empire Utilities Agency. I'm just going to read this. A 7.7% increase for salary retirement seems high, with 25% reduction in accredited labs. Further reduction anticipated in the coming year. Our discussions of reevaluating staff need and possibly reducing the number of staff in this program to consider reduction in accredited labs and reduce work. So the 7.7% that has to do with the safe drinking water account. So that is the fund, of course, that supports the drinking water program. So that was on the portion of the drinking water program. The salaries and so forth were not as, on the cost drivers were not in that range. So I just kind of want to mention that. And then, but yes, regarding the 25% reduction in credit labs and further reduce anticipated in the coming year are the discussions on reevaluating staff needs and possible reducing the total staff in this program, considering reduction in credit labs and thus the reduced work. I'll pass this through to Christine. I know Christine, yeah, they're looking at kind of like all options, but Christine, do you want to just kind of add to that?
Sure, and I'm going to pass that over to Kate to respond.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the first thing I wanted to note was that the 7.7% was related to the drinking water program, not ELAP increases. If I remember correctly, Cassandra, I think ours was 1.2% or something on the, yeah. So much lower. But yeah, in terms of the size of the program, we have always said in these meetings for the last several years that we are open to potentially reducing the size of the program. We don't think we're at that point yet where we can do that. It is important to remember too that, when the program was at public health before, it was underfunded by quite a bit by not raising fees. And so during that time period, we had, a big proliferation of the number of laboratories in California to the point where we almost had 800 labs. And no staff were added during that time to the program. So the program didn't grow when it likely should have. And now that we are back at the water boards and have kind of seen this, somewhat slow shedding of laboratories and a bit more normalizing of the industry, we think that the program is more right-sized now. And that is also in addition to the fact that we weren't doing many things that we were supposed to be doing when we were at public health. There was no enforcement capabilities within ELAP. The proficiency testing studies done by the laboratories were not being checked or monitored. And so we have added back all of those functions that we are, required to do at ELAP. And so we have a whole program now under the water boards. We have the number of staff we have right now we see it as adequate to do the work that we're charged with, if not even us being maybe a little bit lean for the number of laboratories we accredit. So that's a long way to say that, yes, we are potentially open to reducing staff if the program, if the population continues to go down, but we're not at a point yet where we have any sort of stability in the industry where we can really make a decision like that at this time.
And if I could also add, thanks, Kate. When we presented this to the board, we presented the program status and operations, and it was the board's direction for us to restructure the fees. So that's what we're doing, is we're going to restructure the fees based on the size of the program now.
So there are a couple of other questions here. Josie Tellers from City of Davis. So I'll read the first, so there's 3 questions, and the first one is more or less for me and my staff. So question 1, for the goal, the goal to increase 50% in revenue, how much percentage increase will be that for ELAP for fiscal year 23-24? Well, basically at 50%, needing 56% in revenue basically translates into fee increases of around 56%. So fees would need to go up 56% to generate the 56% in revenue. Question 2 is, what percent of remaining labs on-site assessment will be performed by ELAP staff in comparison by OSA by TPAs?
I can take that, Christine. So right now we're sitting between 25 and 30% of the total population being assessed by ELAP, and then 70 to 75%, somewhere in there, being assessed by third parties.
And then question 3 here, and I'll let you guys take this too. Will the stakeholder fee structure work group be formed prior to August 4th?
Yes, we're already in the process of that. And I did want to just add, if we could go back to the third parties question, that's certainly one of the changes in the regulations that has had an impact on our revenue, and a more extreme impact than we predicted, based on the feedback that we got from stakeholders while we were developing those regulations. A lot of what we heard was that contracting out was going to be a really difficult thing for our labs to do, particularly for municipal agencies. So, based on the comments that we got during the regulation development period, we anticipated retaining many more of the laboratories than we have. So we thought we would retain about 50% of the assessments. And it's really actually, like I mentioned, 25 to 30% that we're keeping at this point. So, at that time we made the best prediction that we could, but it based on the, what we had been hearing from our stakeholders. But I think what's come to pass is that it's not been quite as hard as folks were saying, or thinking that it was going to be. So some of the labs that have the option of going to ELAP or a third party have chosen to go to a third party. So that's why that revenue, that piece of the pie is smaller than we expected it to be.
And then another question here. This is from Belinda Vega from BSK Associates. Is there any possibility to reduce State Water Board surplus perhaps to $2 million to help subsidize the ELAP program? And I think what they're saying, what she's asking, is trying to reduce our expenditures by $2 million. This may allow ELAP to delay the increase of fees until the labs can pass on the fee increases to our clients who are currently on contract. It is clear why ELAP needs to increase fees, but the labs need to notify clients of increases to recover our costs. Let me just kind of chime in first, and if Christine and Caitlin want to add anything to this. We basically, for the last 2 years, have taken some measures, of course, to reduce our expenditures. Again, as I mentioned earlier, by up to 5 positions, of those 3 of them charging to another funding source, and then holding positions vacant, which basically reduces the resources in ELAP from 25 to 23 positions by, of course, holding positions. So yes, we've taken those measures over the last couple of years, and it has helped reduce expenditures, which helps lower the need for fee increases, or helps maintain the fee increases. But again, this isn't a sustainable approach. And so for ELAP to fully do what they are required to do, they need to be fully staffed and fully funded. So it's basically why we're here, kind of having these conversations, and looking at trying to find a funding source and a structure that's going to be sustainable and help fully fund the program. So with that said, I don't know, Caitlin or Christine, do you want to add anything to that? I'm not seeing any other questions. The ones coming in right now. Before that one comes in, I just also kind of want to mention, when it comes to our to the expenditures and the cost of our salaries and our retirement, just so everyone understands, that's out of the water board's control. These are all negotiated by the administration and by the bargaining units. And so through the Department of Finance, kind of once they've run the numbers, then they become part of course, the budget iterations, which is what we see in the May revised budget.
I do want to say something, David,
Yes.
to Belinda's comments. So we hear what you're saying, the potential difficulties in this situation, but I would just recommend participating in the work group where we can work with DAS and come with some sort of more sustainable or durable solution that understands the issues of the laboratories. And then we can bring that to the board in the meeting and they can decide how to move forward. So that's what I would recommend.
And then Josie Tellers has a follow-up question. And I'll let Christina or Caitlin take this, but basically, will the 56% increase determination of allocation, how the fees will be allocated to based on ELAP services, be based on stakeholder fee structure work group's recommendation?
So if I understand the question right, I think what she's asking is, does the money go to specific tasks within ELAP or specific services? Is that what you're getting, David?
I am getting that. And then I think, part of the work group and if we were, to move forward with just this 50% increase, how we're going to apply that basically. And she's asking if that this will be based on, of course, stakeholder fee structure work group's recommendation.
So yes, absolutely. So one of the options would be a 56% increase, and we can take recommendations as to how to apply that from the work group. So the work group will primarily be focused on developing a new fee structure. And, the board's direction to us was to develop a fee structure that explores adding some sort of volume-based charge to the current fees. The reason they do that is they want to align, or they would like us to explore that, is they want us to align with the way they charge fees to many other programs, which is has the practical impact of having the larger entities support more of the smaller entities or share more of the the fee burden for the program. So that strategy is I mean, we're not a fee for service program, so we've talked about that and said that many times. We can discuss potentially making recommendations based on some sort of fee for service or the tasks that ELAP staff are performing. But I think it is important to remember too that when we talk about the laboratories that take up the most amount of ELAP staff time, those tend to be the smaller laboratories that are less sophisticated and need more assistance from ELAP. So that's maybe not necessarily the best route for laboratories who are smaller to tend to to want to go down that path towards looking at charging fee for service that way. But that's the direction the board wants us to go, is to explore volume based to shift the fee burden a bit away from the smaller entities. And all of that will be discussed in the fee group. There's still so much that is not known, not developed, and that needs to be figured out. So we're still kind of in the early stages of looking into that.
So I am not seeing any other questions at this time. Okay, well, so let's just talk a little bit about next steps. Kind of recapping, as we just mentioned, as Caitlin and Christine mentioned, is that they're in the process of forming a work group. Potential time frame of this is at the end of this month. So, in the next few weeks, some information should be coming out on how to participate. And again, if you would like to participate, please reach out to Caitlin and Christine. And so more to come on that. But again, looking at the end of June, our next stakeholder meeting regarding, of course, drinking water and ELAP and discussing the budget would be August 4th. And by August 4th, of course, the governor should, sign the budget, and the budget becomes the Budget Act, and we'll have that in place. So we don't anticipate any, surprises to both of these funds at this point. But if there are anything in there, then of course we'll have those discussions at the August 4th stakeholder meeting. And ultimately what we're trying to do is, of course, drive to the board meeting in September, which again is on September 19th or 20th, when staff take agenda items to the board on fee structures. And as many of you know that have participated in this, those agenda items and the narrative and everything come out, 10 days prior to those meetings. So you have an opportunity to, of course, comment on any of the proposals that staff may be proposing and that the board members will be considering and potentially voting to adopt. And the other thing I just wanted to add is that through these meetings, if there's you're looking at any of the charts and the attachments that are part of this handout, if you want to reach out to myself or Cassandra at any point, please do, and we'll be more than happy to help answer any questions. If we need to add program staff involved in that too, we'll coordinate with Christine and Caitlin and get their involvement also. So I see Cassandra, I see your hand up.
Yes, David, I just wanted to give a reminder for the ELAP laboratories to ensure that they're signed up for our subscription list, to make sure, they're getting the invites to stakeholder meetings and other meetings. So if they could, please sign up with the drinking water fees list by emailing the drinking water email, which is das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. So again, I want to thank everyone today for participating in this meeting, taking some time out of your day and joining us. Again, we definitely appreciate the feedback and your participation in this process. I want to thank Christine and Caitlin and program staff being involved. Like I said, you'll be hearing from program staff shortly. Again, with our next stakeholder meeting being August 4th, probably around the end of July, the handouts will be coming out for that meeting. So with that said, everyone have a good day and a good rest of your week. Thank you for participating.